To another edition of TradCatKnight special guest exclusive podcast right here on the TradCatKnight.org website. Folks, today is June the 10th, 2020. I hope you all are having a very wonderful and blessed day. As always, we continue to keep the podcasting moving along here at TradCatKnight.org. And listen, we're podcasting Monday through Saturday, typically about 3 or 4 guests on every day. Some of the top names from around the world. As you know, we leave no stone left unturned when we're talking about this New World Order endgame. We just finished up a great podcast with Monica Schaefer and Mike Walsh. And right now we have a first-time guest. Very excited for this one. Stefan Verstappen, and we're going to be covering prepping, survivalism. We want to obviously get to know Stefan a little bit better and his background, his work, his website, all that good stuff. At the end of the program, we'll allow Stefan to do some what we call shameless self-promotion time. But in any case, folks, before we get to that, we've got to say a quick word to our sponsors. Get over to jacksberry.com, which is a website and service dedicated to the teaching of the virtues, evangelization with a strong devotion to the Immaculate and Sacred Heart. There are many saint quotes, prayers, articles posted throughout the week to help keep souls locked in on the straight and narrow, if you will, in this severe crisis in the church and world at large. Please visit the prayer request, prayer intentions section. Can't thank John Dean enough for all that he has done at this website. We have also this month OLRL.org. Get over to the website. It is a treasure trove of information. There's an online store, folks. You can purchase in bulk a wide variety of items. The website goes through monthly updates. You can become a subscriber to their newsletter and receive regular email updates. Let's get behind OLRL.org. We also have Mike Barry's socialreignofchristtheking.com, and it's dedicated to the education and promotion for the solution for the insanity that's enveloping the world. Mike Barry has been a longtime follower of TradCatKnight.org. Good to see him. We also have Kathleen Loney's 3 Days of Darkness page. Email her at KathleenLLoney@gmail.com. She will help to design a kit for you and your family members for these turbulent times. There's prayers, sacramentals, and herbs. Again, all sacramentals being traditionally blessed. Kathleen has done so much for this website. Kathleen, thank you so much. Last but not least, jacksdave.com, which is dedicated to the support of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and social kingship of Christ. There's many, many videos, podcasts, weekly articles, music, prayers, and so much more. Again, jacksdave.com. Thank you to all of our sponsors who, in part, help to keep this work afloat, so to speak. It helps keep me with the ability of doing this work full time. And listen, over the course of the years, I've been doing this now, 5+ years, and I've probably interviewed well over 1,000 people at this particular point in time. And I would put my special guest list up against anyone that's podcasting or doing radio for that matter. And I just get to meet an awful lot of people, right? Most of whom are not Catholic, which is great and fine. We like to pick their brains, absorb like a sponge in so many of these different areas. We get to learn from one another. And in this particular case, in the area of prepping and survivalism, we've got to mention Stefan Verstappen, who's been doing all kinds of great work in this area. You can get over to his website, chinastrategies.com. He's a Canadian author, researcher, and adventurer. He's an author of 8 books and numerous magazine articles. Again, you could find all of his information there. He's got a GoFundMe. You can donate to his work as well. All of his books, his articles, all that stuff. I like the warrior sort of mindset. And although we might be coming at it from slightly different angles, Stefan, I'm trying to personally get a Catholic militia going in order to kind of resist against this New World Order and police state, which is growing. So we're very militant-minded here, if you will. And I just am very appreciative that you're taking time out to drop the knowledge on everything that you have studied and have looked into. I'm very, very curious about the art of urban survival. We might even entitle this podcast that. But in any case, Stefan, thank you so much for joining the program. And in addition to what I've already said, could you get us to get to know you a little bit better, more about your background, where you're coming from, some of the books that you've written, and all that good stuff? Appreciate it.
Okay, Eric. Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. Much appreciated, and it's an honor. And I'm glad to hear that you're trying to get a Catholic militia together. You know, some of the greatest warriors in history were Catholic militias, and they were known as the Templars.
Yep.
And I know they have a bad reputation. They've been, the center of conspiracy theory for now. But, I don't buy into a lot of that. They were what they were. They were feared on the battlefield. So that's enough for me. Anyways, So, yeah, I talk about myself. I don't really like to talk about myself. It's always
I know.
You know what I mean? best I can say is, because I've questioned, this, and I'm going to come out with a video. What I am is a Renaissance man in the sense of the medieval Renaissance period, which in those days, the highest form of education for a man was somebody that would study philosophy, science, art, music, nature. They also had to be a swordsman, a warrior. They also had to be athletic, self-reliant, self-sufficient, and a survivalist. That's what a Renaissance man or a Renaissance education used to be like 500 years ago. Now, of course, after 100 years of being dumbed down, we have people that can barely tie their own shoelaces. So I guess I started off as a survivalist when I was 13. I joined the Outward Bound program at school, and I spent 6 years doing that. I ended up teaching orienteering at conservation parks. I was an out tripper where I taught canoeing and wilderness skills to disadvantaged youth from the Toronto Boys Home, which was a halfway house. I've traveled the world. I've lived in China. I studied Kung Fu in China. I've been a martial arts master for 35 years.
That is so cool. I love that. I want to dig more into that because listen, over the past few years, I've been getting more into like just fighting in general, but like UFC a little bit. I actually have a friend of mine, well, not necessarily a close friend, but someone who went to my high school who fights in the UFC. He was actually a champion for a long time, Frankie Edgar, and he first started out as a really good wrestler here in the Pittsburgh area. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but then he had to kind of like develop and morph and learn like jiu-jitsu and a lot of these other practices, so it was cool to see him evolve. My favorite fighter is actually Fedor Emelianenko, who knows Russian Sambo. I find that very interesting. So like all the disciplines to me I find very interesting. So maybe you could talk about that for a little bit more, about being a martial arts instructor and a guru, if you will.
Well, Eric, that's a whole show. I'll be honest with you.
I love it, though. We got to do that next month, maybe then.
Next month, we can talk about the way of the warrior. I studied the same thing. I studied numerous different styles. My school here back in Canada, back in the 1990s, was one of the first schools to pioneer mixed martial arts. We, from the beginning of when I started teaching, I always said, there's no rules. If you go down, you keep fighting, and so I can go on a big tangent about martial arts, but martial arts is more than just fighting. It is also a spiritual path. You are supposed to be, and I'm following the Confucius principle here, but Confucius would not be in disagreement with the Savior, and in that his primary purpose, and also 500 years before the Bible, Confucius wrote the Golden Rule. Do not do unto others what you do not want them to do unto you. So, there's an agreement right there with the Bible.
Right.
And Confucius said that the main purpose of a warrior, which he called a gentleman, and again, he described, a Renaissance man. He said that a gentleman had to learn art, science, music, philosophy, nature. But the main purpose is to live a life of virtue. And so truly, the way of the warrior is to live a life of virtue, and that's why you want to be a warrior, because Socrates wrote that courage is the first quality or the first virtue you need to have in order to make all the other virtues possible. And I got to be honest about this. And to be a good man in this world, you're going to be attacked from all angles.
Yes.
You're going to get it from everybody. And if you're a weak man, you can't be a good man. You have to be strong. You have to be self-reliant. You have to have character in order to do good in this world. I don't know what it is. I'm not too much into the supernatural or anything like that, but there is something demonic that will come after you if you show signs of being a virtuous, good man.
Yes.
So if you want to live a life of virtue, if you want to live a life of a good man, you got to be strong and you got to be tough. And that's where the way of the warrior comes in. You got to learn how to fight, because they will come after you. And if you're not tough enough, you won't make it. I had a guy wrote me from Scotland, and he said, "Oh, I study your writing, and I can bench press 350 pounds, and I can, kick over my head, and I go into the bars every weekend, and I pick fights, and how would you rate me as a warrior?" And I wrote back, I said, "Well, that's very impressive, but the ultimate test of the warrior is this: go out and do a good deed. Mm-hmm. Then write me back if you survive."
Right.
I never heard back from him, so I can only assume he took my advice and he wasn't tough enough, because people will turn on you because this is the world we live in now, Eric. You know it. We all know it now. It's an evil, evil world. That's the standard. The standard is degeneracy and corruption and greed and selfishness. That's the standard. So if you don't follow what our society has now become, you stand out and you will be attacked for that.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of common points, Stefan, over the course of our discussions. Hopefully we can continue, to do these as we're getting to know you. But I just finished a piece on in trying to get what I'll call the Order of the Eagle together, this Catholic militia. I use St. Bernard's writings, and he wrote on the Knight Templars as to who they are. And that's all he talked about consistently first, was about being virtue, about the lifestyle, about being sort of like a urban sort of monk or hermit, gentle at first, but then when the battle comes, it has to get ugly at a certain point. So I agree with you. We're living in a culture of self, which you have identified as societal narcissism, the whole selfie culture. We're surrounded by New World Order psychopaths that want us dead, basically around every corner. But amidst all of this, I do believe this is molding people into, how do I put this? Putting them into position, or molding them to be able to resist properly, because I think you would agree with me, in the end, good will always, conquer evil, light over darkness. So the New World Order is not going to win in this. So maybe we could begin to talk about that. And again, and I just went out and I bought books on this for the first time, on like guerrilla warfare, how to actually fight. And outside of, the whole bench pressing of that stuff, because I'm a pretty big guy, 6'4", 250, but I really don't know anything about fighting. I mean, I really want to get into it. I want to learn from others. There's different disciplines I want to learn, but it seems to me like outside of the virtue aspect, you got to be smarter than the enemy too, I'm thinking. And that's like, we use eagle symbology, of course, in Christendom, during the time of Christ, there was an eagle on every lance, so Roman Empire representing kind of, power or whatnot. But an eagle is a very smart bird. It knows when to pick and choose its fights or whatnot. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit. And I know you'll be coming out from a slightly different approach, but I think we can agree on some of these common points.
No, I think we're going to be on the same page with that. You see, in terms of fighting, well, first of all, I do believe you have to get a bloody nose. You gotta experience violence firsthand. You gotta acclimatize yourself to it, because if you don't, then there will always be doubt in your mind on whether or not you can handle violence. And you've got to do a little bit of training, and you got to get hurt. Not seriously. You got to get some bruises and some pulled muscles, and there's nobody that takes martial arts for 40 years that doesn't get a fat lip or a bloody nose once in a while. But you know what? It trains you and it teaches you, and then you don't fear it. And when you don't fear violence, then they can't use fear against you, right? But what I've always said, and this includes survivalism, I said, when I talk to people, it's great to have supplies. It's great to have, medicine and food and maybe some firearms and things like that. Wonderful. But ultimately, your survival tool is your intellect and your ability to read the situation. You got to keep your head about you. You got to be smart and shrewd and cool, so that you can see what the situation is. I found a lot of times when people take martial arts and they get into the sparring or they get into a fights, there's something that I call a brownout. It's not a blackout. You don't actually lose consciousness, but you lose awareness of what the hell's going on around you. And this is very difficult to overcome. And the only way to overcome it is by being prepared and understanding how violence works. And then if you can keep your head about you, then you have nothing to fear. And in the case of survivalism, again, like I to continue my thought, it's great to have all these tools and equipment, but you have to be cunning and shrewd and see what's going on. And if you have that, then it doesn't matter what equipment you have, you will be able to survive. And it's the same thing with a battle. I mean, we are up against the biggest enemy we've ever faced and by we, I mean the virtuous, righteous, patriotic people of this country and Canada. I consider more American. I lived in America many years. I've lived all over the world, including a lot of time spent all through the States. So I identify more as an American than a Canadian. But so our people, those of us, the righteous, the good, the virtuous, we are up against the biggest enemy we have ever faced in history. These people are monolithic in their power, in their money, and they are evil to a degree that seldom seen in history. But one thing I've learned from combat and strategy and tactics is no matter how big and powerful your enemy is, they always have a weakness. So if you are shrewd and cunning enough to be able to spot the weakness, then it doesn't matter if they're bigger than you or stronger than you or faster than you. You can still win.
Now, what would you say, like when we're talking about the New World Order in general, what would be like maybe the top two weaknesses or even just one? Is it their overconfidence that they could just think that they can come out and say, hey, we're going to depopulate the planet by 90%. We're going to tell you that. We're going to come out and force vaccine. Is it their overconfidence maybe perhaps that's going to work against them in the end?
Yeah, it's called hubris. Pride goeth before a fall. And the Jews call it chutzpah. And this is what always happens with psychopaths. They start to get their power, and now they think they're gods. They literally think they're gods. Now look at this Bill Gates lunatic running around doing interview after interview, and he's telling the world what's going to happen. Well, we can't go back to normal until we get the vaccine, and then we'll have to do this. And who the bloody hell does this guy think he is? Who is he? Who is this criminal, this crook, this plagiarist, this scam artist? And he's telling the world what to do. There you go. There's the psychopathic hubris that we see. They get so big and they get so full of themselves, they don't see their own weaknesses. So the weakness with the New World Order, we can defeat them in numerous ways, and the first way we defeat them, it's a strategy from my first book. The first book I published was the 36 Strategies of Ancient China, and it describes a bunch of ruthless strategies and tactics from ancient Chinese and Japanese history. And it shows that no matter how powerful somebody is, there's always a way to get them. But you have to be smart and you have to be ruthless. Now, the first thing we can do to take these people down is to completely disengage. We have to, it's called steal the fire from under the pot. We have to take their source of strength and weaken it. And their source of strength is preying on us. So we have to stop engaging. Turn off the cable TV. Turn off the Netflix. Get rid of the TV altogether. Stop using the credit card. Don't buy from Amazon. Don't go to the movies. Go to local stores. Shop at mom and pop stores and local indigenous businesses. Don't feed into it. Turn it all off. Get rid of the smartphone. I don't have one. I've never had one. Get rid of it because all this money you're paying goes to your enemy. So the first thing we can do is we can boycott, and that's why, surprise, surprise, they're trying to make boycotts illegal all over the world. You're not allowed to boycott. Why? Because that's their weak underbelly. They know that if half of us were to suddenly say, okay, enough of this stuff, we're not participating anymore in your freak show, then their income is going to drop dramatically. So that's the first thing we can do. We become self-sufficient, we become independent, and we don't play their game. And by not playing their game is, not taking part in the media and everything that they're trying to sell you, all the goods, all the materialism. You don't need it. All you're doing is feeding the beast. So my first strategy is boycott everything. Boycott Hollywood, boycott Washington, boycott the elections. Boycott all of it. Forget about it. Just pull back and don't give them your time and your money, and become self-reliant. The second,
I agree. Mm-hmm.
So the second strategy is along those same lines. I'm working on a book. It's coming out soon. Thinking of calling it Neo-Tribalism, the Complete Guide to Creating Communities for Mutual Aid, Support, and Charity. Before the government became this giant behemoth, before we had welfare and unemployment insurance, how did our ancestors look after each other? Well, I can tell you, they looked after each other by forming communities.
Yes.
They formed mutual aid societies. They formed church groups. They formed businesses and charities to look after themselves. And by doing so, and we have numerous examples of how successful this was before the government went out and destroyed them on purpose back in the turn of the century, and the death knell came during the Great Depression, where finally they got rid of the last of the really great community and mutual aid societies. But we can go back to that. You form a community, and I always recommend people form a community around their church because you need commonality. Okay, multiculturalism does not work anywhere. You need to have a group of people that have things in common. Right. And a church is one of the best places to do that. So if you can form a community for mutual aid and survival, and you can call it whatever you want. You can call it the Pittsburgh Disaster Preparedness Society or whatever. Uh-huh. But you have a bunch of people that work together and will pool their money to buy the survival supplies, to buy the medical equipment, to buy the firearms, the radios, the communications equipment you need, so that if it all collapses, you can recreate a miniature society, a functioning society within your own community, among your own people. Now, this is not to say a commune. I've been in communes. Communes don't work. But what I am saying is that everybody can still stay in their own house, in their own apartment and all that. Just work together, pool your money together, so that if everything collapses, then we can support each other. You can support your neighbor. They can help you. You can help them. For example, I just ordered some black market antibiotics. So I've got enough for 5 courses of treatment. So if my next door neighbor, his kids come down with an infectious pneumonia, I can treat them. I've got the medical skills. I've got the antibiotics. And look at the way the medical system is being destroyed as we speak. And
who would have thought by probably going to the hospital these days, you probably lose your life as opposed to saving it,
Absolutely. I work very closely with a doctor in California. And he tells me, he says, going to the hospital is the most toxic, infectious place on the planet. Why would you go there?
Right.
You're taking your life in your hands. So, but let's say, like here in Canada, the doctor's offices are closed. The dentist offices are closed. What if you get an infection? There's nowhere to go. And I think, what's going to happen by September, October, where I think it's really going to get bad.
I agree. Yep.
Yeah, they're really going to, this has been a little trial run. They stuck the knife into our ribs, but we haven't bled out quite completely yet. But wait till October. Then they're really going to come out and just decapitate this country. So what are you going to do then? You need people. You need to get together with friends, relatives, and fellow church members, and who's got medical skills, who's got some supplies, who's got hunting skills, who knows canning and cooking, who knows how to repair a roof on a house. You need those people. You work together. You form a community. You support each other. And that's how they've survived. And then in my book, I give an example throughout the history of mutual aid and survivalism. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, how did civilizations survive? Well, guess where they survived? where civilization and science and writing and education and books survived. They survived in monasteries and nunneries. So here we have the Catholic ideal again, and they were able to preserve the knowledge. And not only did they preserve the knowledge, they were also self-sufficient. They made their own wine, their own bread. They were farmers. They grew their own food. So take that model. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to become a monk, but what I mean is that model worked.
Principles, yes.
Yeah, the principles of that model worked. You had people that cooperated together. They kept the knowledge, they kept the training, they kept the education, they supported each other. They were self-sufficient, self-reliant, and they were able to, we would know nothing about ancient history if it wasn't for the monks that preserved the ancient history books and the textbooks.
Mm. Yeah, wow, Will said, I couldn't have said it any better. We've been talking about this now for quite a while. Communities, preparedness, everything becoming more localized, bartering system, making sure you've got different skills that you can provide for other people. Other people, obviously have different skills outside of you, working together, communal gardens. I've been storing up heirloom, organic seeds now for quite some time for that day. And everyone around me, again, it's more of a Christian community around here, they all pretty much know martial law is around the corner. Like, they used to make fun of me years ago and roll my eyeballs when I would talk about a lot of stuff. It's not so funny anymore. And like, you don't have to be Catholic to see, where the country's going. Like, this should be pretty much it's not rocket science. But I agree. All my top economic analysts are saying September, October, November for the stock market crash, civil unrest, the whole race war riot things will continue on. Just wait until that economic collapse happens, and people are even going to be more on edge. I mean, unemployment's already high right now. It's even going to be far worse in later in the month. Then I'm also going to throw into the mix, at least from our perspective, in Catholic prophecy, Russia actually attacks us. I know some people might not necessarily agree with that, but we've been talking about that now for a while. It could be like over Iran. It could be over the Ukraine border, whatever. But a part of this one famous message, Russia does attack us and overrun Europe. Throw that into the mix. On top of that, what else? More and more pandemics. And just the earth changes, too, are getting more and more interesting, you could say the least. Even out here in the Ohio Valley area, we had a day middle of May, Stefan, where it was literally 25 degrees and snowing one day. And the next day, I was out in shorts in 80-degree weather. So I think we've got to also survive the times along the lines of nature. Maybe you could give us some thoughts on that as well.
Well, I agree. I've seen the same thing. I've been monitoring the weather, and I monitor a lot of different things. And I'm aware of the potential for earth changes, everything from magnetic pole shift to a mini ice age to the solar minimum. We've gone throughout history, up and down, mini ice ages and then warm periods. Generally speaking, warm periods are the best. So when everybody was freaking about, it's getting warm and global warming, I'm thinking, it's a good thing. Did you not read history? Global warming is a good thing. It extends the time for harvesting and crop and growing food, and you can grow food at northern latitudes and things like that. It's a good thing. I don't know why everybody was against it, but we might not be seeing a global warming. I think we're probably going to go into a cooling period. But same thing, within a week, I could see that the temperature fluctuates, 15, 20 degrees in 2 days. That's really kind of unusual, up and down like that. So in my book, The Art of Urban Survival, I also mentioned, there are 3 dangers that you will face in the urban environment. The first danger is your fellow man. And that's why the first chapter of that book is about psychopaths. And I made a video called Defense Against the Psychopath, which explains why our society is as evil and dysfunctional as it is now. And that's because we're run and controlled by psychopaths. So that's the first evil. You have to deal with your fellow man. And as I wrote an article for the Trends Journal, Gerald Celente, and a good Catholic boy. And it's called Historical Cycles, Are We Doomed to Repeat the Past? And yes, we are. And we will repeat the past. And what happens is, as the society starts to crumble and degrade, the first thing you're going to deal with is the psychopaths, I don't know, they come out of the woodwork. They suddenly flourish in times of chaos. And what you're going to see is increase in crime. That's in the book. That's all in the first chapter. So the first thing is to learn how to defend yourself against crime, what to do if your home is invaded, how to secure your home, what kind of improvised weapons can you put together, what to do if you're walking down the street or taking a taxi or going on the subway or get caught in a demonstration or a riot, and what to do if you get tear gassed. All that is in the first section of the book, which is the threats from fellow man. The second part of the book is natural disasters. You got to be prepared for that. Earthquakes and hurricanes, and look at the fires we've had last year. California, Australia, half of Australia practically burned down, and even here up in Canada and Alberta, the fires, and in British Columbia, and I'll be honest with you, I believe most of those fires were started on purpose.
Yes, I agree. Mm-hmm.
They're burning us out. They don't want us out in the rural areas because we're too independent out there. They want us in the ghetto where they can control us and can shoot us easily. So be prepared for natural disasters. Be able to handle floods and be able to have tools and equipment and extra lumber around the house so you can board up the windows and batten down the hatches, be able to make repairs around the house for natural disasters. And then the third category is social disasters, and I cover what we are seeing right now, pandemics, martial law, corruption, and eventually war. Now, I differ with you on Russia. Okay. I think China is the biggest threat right now.
Okay. No, yeah, I wouldn't disagree that they're not a threat. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was a collaborative effort between Russia and China. But yeah, it's a long-withstanding prophecy in the church. It's called the Fatima message that talked about Russia coming out of the woodwork. So we'll have to keep our eye on it, certainly. Now, you mentioned martial law. It's really, really cool because if you type in your name into YouTube, one of the first videos you're going to find, folks, is how to survive martial law. So if everyone could close their eyes here in the listening audience, tell us what life is like on a daily basis. Like martial law is declared here where I'm at, Steubenville, Ohio. What is life like a day in and day out? What can we expect? How do we get around it? Maybe we could spend a few minutes on that.
Okay, well, martial law, there's two strategies that you can use during the kind of tyranny we are living under right now and under martial law. And the Japanese term is the way of grass. And another way of talking about it is the gray man strategy. So basically what you want to do is become as innocuous as possible. And to do that, I recommend, if there's widespread looting and, or if the government forces are going down the street because, there's a law on the books, you're not allowed to hoard food during times of crisis, so they can send out the military to go check your refrigerator and your pantry and steal whatever they can. So in those cases, then, what I recommend is that you take plywood, you board up all your windows, and you smash the windows. Then you take some spray cans and you spray gang graffiti all over the house. Then you take a bunch of old clothes and old furniture and you throw them all in front of your front yard or the walkway up to your house. And in that way, and then don't run the lights or the generator or whatever to make yourself a target. And in that way, it looks like you've already been looted,
Right. No, that makes sense, yeah.
Right, so if you've got gangs of either street thugs, gangs of either street thugs or police or military or UN or whatever, they're going up and down the street looking for houses that might have stuff that they can steal. And there's hundreds of houses, up and down your street. Anyways, they go by your house, they see all this garbage on the front yard, you see all the windows in your house are broken and it's boarded up and it's spray painted. Look, there's another 99 houses down the street. Why would they even bother to stop and look? Yeah. So this is part of the strategy of surviving things like martial law and war and criminal activity is by becoming innocuous, by not being a target, by looking like you've already been been picked over. I used the same strategy because I like bicycling, and I bicycle everywhere. I've been all through the States. I've bicycled through every city, bad neighborhoods on a bicycle, But you know what? What keeps me safe is that I dress like a homeless person.
Mm.
Yeah, I put on my crappiest pants. I put on my crappiest jacket. I put on a black knit hat, and I look like a homeless person. I go downtown. The homeless people say hello to me, and actually, the homeless people are a lot nicer. I'm not afraid of homeless people. I went downtown and I sit down in the grass. Homeless people come up. Hey, how you doing? Yeah. Would you like a beer? I got extra beer for you.
Yeah.
Guess what? None of my friends or family ever offered me a beer when I first came back to Canada. But the first time I dressed up as a homeless person and bicycled down to the city, a stranger offered me a beer. But by dressing as a homeless person, nobody bothers you. Now, I can put on the suit and tie. I can dress really sharp. And if I had to go down to the business district or the hotel or something like that, I put on my, the suit and the tie, the double-breasted brass button jacket with the, with the crest on the shoulder. Mm-hmm. Oh boy, do they kiss my butt? I'm telling you, Eric. Yes, sir. Hello, sir. It's about appearance, and you can manipulate your appearance to manipulate the way people react to you. So if I have to pretend to be a big shot to get something done, or if I need to go and complain to somebody in the government and get some services, I dress up really nice. And guess what? Everybody treats me like royalty. But if I were to dress up like that and bicycle down to the bad neighborhood, I'm going to be, I won't last very long.
Especially in a situation where, like, if we do have an economic collapse, things get worse, and it's sort of like, the zombie apocalypse or whatnot. You don't want to be dressed up all nice. I mean, listen, there's been kids killed over Jordan shoes now, before the collapse even happened. So, you want to just kind of wear the basics, if you will, be simplistic, if you will. But definitely want to be overly dressed. And that's actually kind of interesting, that point that you made, because I live in a town here, Steubenville, Ohio, where, and I said this years ago to some family members who actually wanted to leave here, and they wanted to go to kind of nicer areas. I said, well, you know what? If Russia or China or whatever country or UN comes here and they try to invade, half the homes on my street, not necessarily my area, but down the road a little bit, they're perfectly described as what you just described. They're already boarded up. They already look like Russians passed through and looted it, or UN people looted it, and so it does make it easier in that situation. As crazy as it sounds, they'll just pass us up largely. So that's a great point that's in your book. Yeah,
it's hiding in plain sight is another way of describing it, right? Yeah. So because if you try to hide, you look suspicious by trying to hide. So you hide in plain sight, and this again refers back to being cunning and ruthless about your survival tactics. I don't have to, I could go downtown, bicycle, and maybe sling a shotgun and have a holster on my hip with a firearm. I'm just going to be asking for trouble. But if I go downtown, I'm dressed like a beggar, nobody's going to bother you. But that's being cunning, and using disguises is part of it. And I'll give you another example. I have another disguise. Now, I've worked many years for St. John Ambulance, which is the British Commonwealth version of the Red Cross.
Okay.
So I've trained cops, I've trained fire departments, I've been involved in search and rescue teams. I know the lingo, I know the jargon, I know what to do, I know how to do it. I have a search and rescue outfit, bright red jacket, yellow a safety helmet with flashlight. I've got a radio, I've got first aid kit and equipment and things like that. If I were to put that on, I can get past police roadblocks, right?
Yeah.
Right? So, the police set up a roadblock. Nobody's allowed in or out. They're already doing that here. They're already doing that in Australia. You're not even allowed to cross provincial borders or state borders. But if I were to dress up in my search and rescue outfit, and I look the part, I'm a big, tall guy too. I look like a cop or a fireman.
Right.
Now, I've got the clothes on. I got a crest that says Volunteer Search and Rescue, right? I made it up. I printed it out on the laser printer, and I ironed it onto my own red jacket, right? Look, nobody's going to look too closely during these times, right? It's all about image. It's all about how you present yourself. and I can brazen it out. And if I had to get out of town and there's a police roadblock preventing me from getting through, oh, the other thing is I've got a flashing blue light that I can put in the dashboard of my windshield in my truck, right?
Yeah.
Flashing blue light is legal. Flashing red light is illegal if you're not police or fire. But a blue light is perfectly legal. Yellow light, perfectly legal. So get a blue and or a yellow light, stick it in your windshield, and then if I go through the police roadblock, I'm going to tell the guys, listen, there's two young kids got lost in the woods. They're up at 10 miles down the road. I'm part of volunteer search and rescue. I'm going to go out and look for them. I guarantee you I'll get past that roadblock.
Wow. That's a great point, yeah.
No, but what I'm saying is you got to think strategically like this. We can't just, you have to be cunning. And cunning and ruthless and by ruthless, I don't mean cruel or predatory. I mean, listen, I'm going to lie to the cops to get past them. I'm going to lie to the gang members to get past them, so I don't care. It's a survival situation. I also have another outfit. I got a black hat. It's got security written on it. I got a big jacket. It's got security written on it. I got the radio. So if I were to sling my shotgun and put on the security outfits, I could stand out in front of my house and I will scare the living bejesus out of anybody that's thinking of breaking in. Because, I'm a big, tall guy dressed in black, security all over the place. I'm armed to the teeth. They'll go to the next house down the road.
Yeah.
So those are three of my strategies, right? Which brings me to the second strategy I was going to mention, and that is the strategy of the chameleon. You blend in to whatever the situation requires you to blend into. So if it's safer for me to look like a homeless person so people leave me alone, fine. I blend in with the homeless community. Nobody's going to bother me. If it's more convenient or more strategic for me to appear to be, one of the first responders, I can do that too. I'm a first responder. I know the lingo. I know how to do it. I can help people, and I do help people. If you get injured out in the woods and there's no other medical care around, you'll be glad to know me because I know what to do, and I've got the equipment. I got the antibiotics. I got the surgical kits. I got it all. And if you are afraid, like if I have to go and back up my neighbors because there's gangs running around breaking into houses, then I know a couple of ex-cops here in the neighborhood nearby where I live. I know a couple of other big guys. We all put on our security outfit. We all stay in communication through radio. We all have a shotgun or an AR-15. We go and stand in front of people's houses, or we drive up and down the street.
Yeah.
That is your strategy for that situation. So you have to be able to adapt to the situation, be cunning and ruthless. And a lot of the times, a lot of what it takes is to brazen it out, right? Don't back down. Don't show any fear. Don't show any self-doubt, because that'll sink you. So if I'm going to go through the police checkpoint as search and rescue, then I'm going to tell these guys, get the hell out of my way. And if some police question on what security firm I work for or why I'm walking around with a shotgun, I'll tell them to shut the hell up. It's above your pay grade. Now get out of here.
Yeah, unbelievable, Stefan. Unfortunately, we're just about out of time. Great opening podcast. Like I said, hopefully we can get you back on next month. Maybe we could break down the way of the warrior. I'd like to hear more about that. What we always do with our guests is we allow our guests some parting words and some shameless self-promotion time. So whatever you'd like to get out by way of the YouTube, by the way of the books, whatever you'd like, the website again, please do so, and I'll close out the show. Appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Eric. Listen, I have a deal for everybody. It's a really good deal. It's $39. And the deal is this. If you purchase all of my books as a PDF download, then I will include, free of charge, 280 books and manuals that will cover everything on survivalism, everything from farming to growing a garden to improvising electric generators to escape and evade and guerrilla tactics to improvised munitions to medicine, wildlife medicine, emergency surgery techniques, how to build a house, how to build shelters and ferment liquor, you name it. Everything you would need. Let's say the entire world just completely vanishes and you had to rebuild civilization again from scratch. These 280, well, actually it's more than that, but these 280 books will provide you all the information to rebuild civilization. Everything you could possibly want to know how to do are contained in these books, and you would download it, $39 US. Go to my website, chinastrategies.com. I've got it up now on the front page. Download it and save it on a flash drive. And then all you need is an iPad or a smartphone and the ability to recharge the batteries on that, so you can use a hand crank or a solar panel or something like that. So long as you can keep that thing recharged, then you can read these books. And the books are already divided into 5 categories, so it's easy to find the books you need to solve the problems that you would have right now. And that knowledge will help you to survive anything that's coming.
Yeah, wow, great deal. Thank you, Stefan, for dropping that on the listening audience. And folks, I just want to thank you all for tuning in today. Again, look for Stefan next month. I'll be in touch with him probably over the next 3 days or so, and we'll hopefully hem out another date for next month. We'll break down, in particular, some of his books, probably The Way of the Warrior next podcast. In any case, folks, thank you all for tuning in to TradCatKnight special guest exclusive podcast for this June the 10th, 2020. Until next time, stay safe and God bless.